Like many people, I didn't have a great impression of hatching when I first started drawing. It seemed hard to know what to do and how to use it and what direction the lines were meant to go. And yet I've come to see it as really such a good friend when I draw. Not just can we create shadows and darknesses with hatching, but we can create form and edge and texture and depth and light. Let me show you in this scene. But first, my 8-minute outline is being sped up to 1 minute so you can see what I had on the paper before I started. And if you'd like to start having a go at this scene from this line drawing, then I'm going to put this line drawing on my channel community page so you can print off a copy and not have to go through this process of drawing at first. This took me 8 minutes to do in real time. The hatching, all the hatching that you see, took me 63 minutes to do. So hatching is not necessarily a difficult or onerous thing to do once we start to work out how to use it, what it can be used for. As I've said a few times, I can't understand how I could possibly draw this scene and create the effects I do without hatching, without thinking of hatching and of making marks rather than lines. Now, I'm starting with a 0.3 millimeter pen. That's the heaviest pen I use for the closest of these roughly hewn stone steps. And one of the challenges with these is that I can't just draw a straight line or a continuous line for the edges of the steps, because that would give the impression of a sharp edge, which we certainly don't have. I can't do it at the sides of the steps because that would give the impression that the join is smooth and clean, and it's certainly not. There's all sorts of leaf litter and things that obscure any chance of a straight or clean line, even if it were there underneath it all. And so I need to find marks that will allow the curvature of the steps, of the edges, to be seen, to be felt, to be perceived in some way. And hatching is the way to do that. But I'm not just using hatching for the edge, I'm actually using hatching for the form, for the three-dimensional curvature, the undulating in and out of surfaces that we particularly see in natural landscapes and with rocks. So I'm using hatching to help show where the rocks come out and go in, as well as indicating changes in colour due either to the actual colour of the object or to shade or shadow being cast. Now you'll see I'm using quite a range of marks. I'm using, understandably, a lot of little short straight hatching lines. And some of them I just hatch, and some of them I cross hatch, and some of them I cross hatch 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I also use dots as well to create a different feel, to soften a line that's disappearing. I do draw lines sometimes when I've got an edge of dark shadow right at the very edge, which happens with some of the crevices in the rocks, or where various layers of rocks separate and have weathered slightly differently. There is no right or wrong answer with hatching. It's what creates the effect that I'm after. But I'm not just thinking of the curvature of the form or of the edges. I'm also thinking of the texture. What is the surface of the texture looking like, and how can I represent that? And so the leaf litter surface texture is very different to the rock surface texture. It's very different to the effect of the leaves that we see. All of these things I'm going to try and create using my hatching, by controlling my hatching. And we can't really know for sure exactly what that's going to mean until we finish the drawing, because most of this I didn't really know how it was going to go. And by that I don't mean whether it was going to turn out or not, but exactly what directions and how much hatching and how dark my values were going to be until I'd progressed a lot of this drawing. And then even at the very last minute, after I've taken off the tape, you'll see me quickly dash in for a little addition of some extra values where I decided it needed just a little darkening of my darkest bits just to tweak the sense of drama, the sense of movement a little bit more, to break up an area that I thought was too large in the one value without saying enough. And mostly, I'm creating everything with hatching. There are just a few spots where, with the leaf litter, say, I'm drawing individual leaves, particularly in the front section. But I'm hatching around those leaves, and I'm hatching over the top of the leaves to represent the shadow being cast on them, depending where the light's coming from. And all the time I'm paying particular attention to the light direction and the shape of my rocks. But I'm also paying attention to what will look best in my drawing. I'm paying attention to what's going to create interesting shapes, what's going to bring clarity to different shapes, different elements in my scene, so that they don't merge together unless I want them to merge together in a visual sense. Now, the most important things are these steps, of course. Steps are a great compositional subject because they do invite us to travel up them. Now, you may not have noticed, because I'm going pretty fast, and just on that, you're watching this at 4 times normal speed. But if you want to see me do this slower, use the cog icon and you can reduce this to 1/4 speed and actually watch me draw it in real time if you want. So that's within your control, or you might like to do that just for a part of it, or pull it back to double time at least to be able to see in a little more detail exactly what I'm doing. And I probably would suggest for this drawing that you do that, because I'm taking particular care with my edges of the steps. And one, I think, very important technique tip to be aware of in our hatching is to choose which direction we're going to do the hatch line from, because the direction, top or bottom, left or right, that we start from, we have more control over where that line starts. Whereas if we then do a flick line, because we want the other end of the line to end in a gradual way, we don't want to kind of have a thick line that stops dead, but we want the line to lessen and become less dark, less thick, that we lift it off as we're still drawing it. It's a little bit harder to control exactly where that ends. So choosing the best side that we're going to start the hatching from to get, if you like, a clean edge or a dark edge or a straight edge is a very worthwhile thing to do. And if you're finding this helpful, please hit the like button for me. And please leave a comment and tell me, how do you find hatching? Is it just about shadows for you? Or do you deliberately use hatching to create all sorts of visual effects? I'm also using hatching in this to create a sense of depth. I'm controlling my hatch lines, how thick they are, how dark they are, how sharp the edges are, to make the closest things look closer and the furthest things look further away. It's not so obvious just yet because we're still mostly dealing with the closest things. But pay attention at the end for my efforts to create a sense of distance, of things moving back, not just by using a finer pen, because I switched to a 0.2, really once I go above what I'm drawing now, and then also a 0.1 millimeter pen, which I think is pretty dried out as well, for the very furthest away details. But for now, I'm still working on all these closest things. And particularly with large rocks such as this, we have to give enough surface texture and form and visibility and colour in our hatching to help make them interesting. They're such a major part. The other thing I'm doing is I'm paying particular attention to the fact that the right-hand side rock is in shade in a way that the left-hand side rock isn't. And so however I hatch that, I want to make sure that I have a darker effect on the left-hand side than on the right-hand side. But equally, I do want to go dark enough, particularly on that section I've just been doing now, to create a bit of interest, that very large rock on the left doesn't end up looking a bit boring, a bit plain, or a bit, I don't know, blown up, puffed up like a balloon, which isn't a very natural look for a weathered sandstone rock. And all the time, particularly with the edges of these steps, pay attention to the fact that I'm not just doing an even amount of hatching all the way along with those vertical lines. I'm angling those lines in different directions to represent the fact that these aren't nicely cut steps that go straight down. So some of them lean forward, some of them lean back, and some of them change direction halfway along. Some of them have little ripples in them for various reasons. Some of them just seem to slope down and disappear. And so I want my lines to reflect, my hatch lines, to reflect the different amount of shade or shadow that's being caught or cast by that variation in the steps. And that goes a huge way to creating a greater sense of movement, of vitality, not just in the marks, but in the effect of the marks, in the way the drawing looks. It gives increasing interest to a subject which is in itself relatively plain. A series of stone steps to walk up becomes a subject when we put enough interest in it to keep attention and to create a sense of what this is, and to do that clearly enough that people looking at this scene can link it with other thoughts, memories, whatever. Now, I'm still using the 0.2 millimeter pen now for this part where I'm doing the rocks further back, and I'm also going to have the foliage to do, which is a very different subject, obviously, to the rocks. And having done so much rock at this stage, I've really got to pause and stop and think, gosh, how am I going to do it? Because I want to make it look different to the rocks. I don't want it to feel like it's all the same thing. And so that did cause me a little bit of consternation. It looks like I was off thinking how I'd do this at that point. No, I was actually trying to find a 0.1 millimeter pen, I realise now. Firstly, notice that I do some horizontal hatching here for the tree trunks. Besides the fact that that's my preferred way of hatching tree trunks, all things being equal, ones that are this thin, ordinarily I very likely would have just used some quick vertical hatch lines. But because I've got so many hatch lines that are vertical or vertical-ish and not many horizontal ones, I take the chance to put the horizontal ones in. Even though it feels like it takes forever, I just do it very quickly. And I'm not too overly concerned with doing it exactly, because I'm wanting these trees to feel far away. And so because we see far away things less precisely, a little less precision, not carelessness, but not joining everything up exactly, visually creates the sort of effect we have in life when we look at distances. And so that's what I'm trying to do here. And now I'm doing the last of the foliage. I want to keep it really light because, well, this is the light. The light is actually all in the upper part coming through, and all of the foreground that I've drawn actually is in shade. And now I'm really getting serious about the final adjustments. In my mind, this is now in the final adjustment period. I actually would stand up while I was drawing and look through the camera, because having the whole thing reduced into the camera screen or the telephone screen let me see it condensed and let me see more easily, more quickly, the interplay of lights and darks on the subject, on how easy it was to see things, work out what was what, and also to see whether there was enough variation, enough interest in what I was doing or not. So that let me then make those final adjustments. without having to go back to it later. There were just a few that I did after I removed the tape. And you can see that I'm particularly now trying to just define the form of those upper areas that I've done. But I don't want to make them too dark because dark values come forward. So although they're relatively dark to what's around them, I don't want to make them as dark in my drawing as perhaps they are in the photo, because that would mess with the sense of distance and of things moving back that I've established in the foreground. And as I said, this is all the fine tuning. And now the reveal. What do you think? 63 minutes of drawing. Hatching can be our friend. We can achieve so much through it, more than just shadows, form, edges, texture, depth, light, because whatever we leave creates the light effect. And these are the final adjustments. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you hit the like button if you've got to this stage and you haven't already, and I hope you have a go. You can start, as I said, from the actual hatching part if you use my line and dot outline from my channel community page. But look, whatever you use, whatever you draw, however you draw it, hatching or no hatching, make sure you have fun. But I certainly had fun with this one. I'll see you next video. Bye.